Number 10. The Nazi Ghost Train. In April 1945, in the idyllic and hilly town of Walbrzych, Poland, a train passed through. Mysteriously, though, the train never made it to the other end of the tracks. Many believe this is the fabled Nazi gold train carrying priceless treasures taken from Jewish families before they were tragically taken to various concentration camps across Europe. For decades, rumors circulated about the ghostly locomotive, which is said to hold billions of dollars worth of precious items, but no one had any clue as to its whereabouts. The belief is that the train went into a series of hidden underground tunnels created by the Nazis in order to transport important individuals and valuables should the need arise. That was until 2015, when two men approached the mayor of the town claiming that they knew the whereabouts of the missing Nazi ghost train. They said that the 500-foot-long armored train was somewhere nestled in the hills and mountains not far from the town. Authorities from the Polish government then spent months attempting to dig up the area where the treasure hunters claimed that the train was hiding. As interest grew, local businesses began to sell ghost train memorabilia to tourists that flocked to the region in preparation to see a slice of lost World War II history. However, the train was never found, and Polish officials say there's no evidence of the ghost train ever being there. Meanwhile, others still protest that there's undeniable proof of its existence. Number 9. Rls Gold. Erwin Rommel was an infamous Nazi general whose prowess in the North African campaign of the Second World War earned him the title of the Desert Fox. However, it's not just his skills on the battlefield that people continue to talk about him to this day. It's his lost gold. During his time in Tunisia, Rommel and his forces managed to acquire over $24 million of gold and other valuable items from the Jewish population. In 1942, Rommel's stolen spoils were transported by ship to be sent to Berlin. However, the ship never made it, and many believe it may have sunk off the coast of Corsica. Since then, people have been obsessed with finding the gold, with countless books and YouTube channels on the subject. One famous name who was keen on finding the lost treasure was Ian Fleming, the author of the James Bond novels. He even asked a national British newspaper, the Sunday Times, to fund an expedition so that he could try and find it. But they refused, thinking the operation was too costly despite Fleming's expertise in the war. This didn't stop Fleming's interest in the story, though, as even he mentioned Rommel's gold in one of his James Bond novels on Her Majesty's Secret Service. Bond discussed the grisly fate of two adventurers who had been unlucky in their search for the Nazi treasure. Number 8. Peking Man Fossils. The oldest items to be lost during World War II are the Peking Man fossils. At over 500,000 years old, the skeletal remains were discovered in a cave near Beijing in China. When they were found, they were the oldest record of human existence at the time. Studies conducted on the fossils and at the site discovered that not only did our early ancestors use tools, but they also were the first to use fire. Sadly, research was cut short in 1941 when the Chinese government sought to ship the bones to the USA for safekeeping due to the conflict with Japan. But the fossils never made it to their destination. Rumors suggest that the train they were placed on to arrive at the port was halted by Japanese forces. Believing them to be useless, they would have been discarded, only to be picked up by the local people and ground up into traditional medicine under the belief that they were dragon bones. Others believe that, similar to the fate of a famous English king, the bones lay under a Chinese parking lot. Scientists and paleontologists still mourn the loss of the Peking Man fossils to this day. The bones would have given researchers insights into early human life, especially with newer technologies such as forensics and CT scans. Although casts were made of the bones before their disappearance, sadly they don't provide as many results as the originals would have. There is a silver lining to the tale, though. A museum in Sweden is thought to have a single tooth from the Peking Man, which had been sent to the Museum of Uppsala. Although it's small, it can hopefully allow us to unlock some clues about our distant past. Number 7. Raphael's Portrait of a Young Man. Raphael's portrait of a young man is truly bizarre. With a lopsided black hat and brown fur cloak draped over their shoulder, it almost looks like the painting is watching your every move out of the corner of its eye. In the background is a clear blue sky and the gray buildings of a town in the distance. At least, that's what we think the colors are. In truth, nobody actually knows. Raphael's Portrait of a Young Man is one of the most famous paintings stolen during World War II. The only records we have of it now are black and white photographs. We believe the painting was completed by the famous artist in 1513 and 1514. It was displayed in the Princess Kartioski Museum in Poland. When the Nazis invaded, it was hidden alongside 3 other famous artworks: Da Vinci's Lady with an Ermine, Rembrandt's Landscape of the Good Samaritan, and the Portrait of a Young Man. Unfortunately, it did not take long for the Nazis to sniff out the masterpieces. They found them just 2 short weeks after they were hidden away. They were displayed in the residence of Hans Frank in Krakow, who was the governor of the general government. In 1945, the Allies were able to arrest Frank and found the Rembrandt and the Da Vinci painting in his villa, but the Raphael portrait was nowhere to be found. Was it smuggled out ahead of time? Was it damaged in the war beyond repair? Let us know what you think in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 6. SS Minden. In 1939, just after World War II broke out, the German ship SS Minden set sail from Brazil. Its official cargo was listed as resin being transported for industrial use. However, it is heavily believed that the vessel was instead carrying gold and other treasures sent from South American banks to Nazi Germany. The ship made its way up through the Atlantic before it was intercepted by the British Navy around 120 miles from the Icelandic shoreline. Fearing their cargo would be seized, the vessel was deliberately sunk to prevent it from falling into enemy hands. It's still unconfirmed what was actually on board the SS Minden, as its whereabouts remain unfound to this day. Recently, treasure hunters attempted to find the vessel, although the search was called off in June 2018 when their permit for ocean floor exploration expired. Number 5. Yamashitas Gold. Japanese General Tomoyuki Yamashita was known as the Tiger of Malaya. He earned this name during World War II when he successfully commanded his army of 30,000 men to capture the British-held territories of Malaya and Singapore. His occupation of the territory was brutal, leading to the deaths of around 100,000 Chinese men and others in what was dubbed as the Sukching massacres. However, one of the other things this feared general is known for is the suspected secret that he took with him to his grave when he was hanged on February 23, 1945. That secret is the location of a large hoard of gold hidden deep in the Philippines. It's said that the gold was stored in one of many tunnels across Asia. Called the Golden Lily Tunnels, they were ordered to be built by Japanese Prince Tsunoyoshi Takeda when he felt that they were losing the war. He did it so that the valuables the Japanese army had obtained from across Southeast Asia couldn't be stolen. The tunnel holding Yamashitas Gold is said to be underneath the ground on the Philippine island of Luzon, although this is not confirmed. Rumor has it that the slaves and soldiers tasked to build the tunnels were sealed inside them upon completion, meaning that as they died of starvation and suffocation, the secret was safe and stayed only with Yamashita and the prince. Number 4. AAM Maru. The AAM Maru was a Japanese cruise liner that was built in 1941. However, she never managed to be used for leisure, as thanks to the war she was acquired by the Japanese Navy. As the tides of the war began to turn, she became a Red Cross ship in 1945, transporting resources and aid to Allied prisoners of war in Japan. As such, she was allowed safe passage on the seas. After delivering her cargo, she then headed on to Singapore, where she took on stranded diplomats, military personnel, and civilians to give them safe passage back across the waves. This should have been a routine operation, but sources state that they witnessed sacks of rice being loaded one afternoon, but that very evening the dock was cleared and the soldiers removed the bags and replaced them with contraband, rumored to be worth billions of dollars. We won't be able to prove these sources right or wrong, though. On its way back, a U.S. submarine, the USS Queenfish, mistook her for a warship and torpedoed the AAM Maru. There were thousands of people on board, and only one survived. In the 1970s and 80s, Chinese salvage crews spent $100 million on locating the wreck. They were successful and were able to return bodies and artifacts to Japan, but no treasure was ever found. Curiously, the Japanese demanded $52.5 million in compensation, even though the official contents manifest for the AAM Maru only had a value of $7.5 million. Number 3. Royal Casket. The Royal Casket was a memorial wooden chest created and curated by the Polish princess, Izabela Dorota Czartoryska. It held valuable items from the Polish royal family. According to history, the Royal Casket contains 75 artifacts of the Polish aristocracy. Notable pieces include King Sigismund the Old's pectoral cross, Queen Marie Casimir's gold watch, Queen Marie Lezysenska's silver rosary, and King Poniatowski's gold snuff box. It was located within the Czartoryska Museum alongside other treasures. In 1830, during the Russian-Polish uprising, it was hidden within the wall of an outbuilding of Krakow Palace. However, this is not where it went missing. When the Nazis occupied Poland in 1939, it's said that a German employee revealed the location of the Royal Casket. Upon digging it up, the Germans divided the treasure between themselves, and if the rumor is to be believed, some were even melted down and repurposed. Although some of the collections of the Czartoryska Museum have been recovered, no one has ever been able to locate the Royal Casket or its contents. Number 2. Hanjo Masamune. Masamune was a fabled swordsmith in Japan during the 13th century. His swords were heralded far and wide and remain some of the best forged weapons to this day. The Hanjo Masamune is one of the most famous of his creations, ending up in the possession of the Tokugawa shogunate and serving as a symbol of their power. It was declared an official Japanese treasure by the Japanese government. However, upon Japan's defeat, the US demanded that every person should hand over all weapons, including their swords. Reluctantly, but to set an example to his people, Tokugawa Ieyasu handed over his family's swords, among them the legendary Hanjo Masamune. From there, the weapons were loaded onto a ship to travel across the Pacific and back to the States. However, this is the last we ever heard about the priceless Hanjo Masamune. Number 1. The Amber Room. Originally a masterpiece constructed in 1701 by German sculptor Andreas Schluter, the Amber Room was revolutionary for its time. No one before had attempted to make interior decorations out of something that had typically been reserved for jewelry and accessories. Schluter created many engraved amber panels with the help of Danish craftsman Gottfried Wolfram. They developed new ways to work with the material, creating intricate designs laced with gold, silver, and precious jewels. The work continued through the years, being a true labor of love and involving many other craftsmen who continued what the pair had started. In 1707, the piece was installed in Berlin City Palace, where it remained until 1716 when Tsar Peter the Great from Russia fell in love with the piece. As a result, the then ruler of Germany, Frederick William I, presented the room to Peter as a gift. The room was moved to St. Petersburg, Tsar Peter's newly created city, and was heralded as the 8th wonder of the world. Even in spite of its relocation, work continued on the room until 1770, when the amber masterpiece was finally completed, and it was massive. Over 6 tons of amber were used over a space of 590 square feet, and experts reckon that its value would have been between $145 to $290 million. The Amber Room remained in its Russian home until 1941, when the Germans invaded the city, then called Leningrad, as part of Operation Barbarossa. Despite the Russians' attempts to move and safeguard the Amber Room, the German military was able to locate it, disassemble it into crates, and take it away, believing that as German artwork, it should be brought back with them. This wasn't when the piece was lost, though. The German public was able to enjoy the piece for 2 whole years when it was installed in Königsberg Castle. However, as the tides of the war began to shift, it was dismantled again in 1944 before bombing ravaged the city. The Amber Room was never seen again.
9. Lost Cuban City. The Caribbean country of Cuba has long been controversial, but noted for its various classic icons, like Fidel Castro. One thing you don't link to Cuba so much is pyramids. In 2001, a team of scientists stumbled upon a geometric stone location that could be a forgotten city below the waves. Situated at the western tip of the island, the underwater city contains what appears to be megaliths with a distinctive pointy shape. Interestingly, this is like a stack of structures. Some of the structures are 1,312 feet, 400 meters wide, and 131 feet, 40 meters tall. Researchers aren't exactly sure what to make of it. The city complex, if that's what it actually is, was picked up using sonar. How old it is and when it was constructed is still up for debate. Some believe it dates back approximately 6,000 years. Others believe it may be as old as 50,000 years. Either way, it opens up all kinds of questions and strange possibilities. For example, were people even capable of building structures like this tens of thousands of years ago? Researchers are saying that it could be that Cuba and Mexico were connected by a land bridge long ago. The shapes and formations of these pyramids are mysteriously similar to the ones built by the Mayan and Aztecs. Some of the structures have a language on them that no one's been able to decipher. They're hoping to return with underwater archaeology devices that'll be able to move sand off the structures to get a clearer view. 8. Mustang. The last place you expect to find a car like this is at the bottom of a river. However, that's precisely what happened when the Adventures with Purpose YouTube channel set about recovering a gas guzzler that had become a mud guzzler after some considerable time underwater in Portland, Oregon. The vintage muscle car ended up seeing the light of day again in 2020, 40 years or so since it rolled off the production line. The term muscle car refers to a 2-door sports coupe with powerful engines operating at a high level. But how did it end up in a watery grave in the first place? The 1973 Ford Mustang was actually discovered when a dive team was searching for a truck, which it was speculated got dunked in the river by the owner's other half. Sounds a little spicy, but best we don't get into the nitty-gritty of that. Anyway, the divers went on to discover a range of classic cars in the depths. Sounds like a weird underwater showroom. Though, of course, decades of rust had set in, plus the vehicles had been nibbled on by more than a few fishies. Not what you'd call roadworthy. The first attempt to bring the Mustang to the surface didn't go well, and resulted in the engine being ripped from the transmission and being brought to the shore by itself. The V8 sported some long tube headers, suggesting that it was a souped-up car before it was unceremoniously deserted in the river. 7. Locomotive Graveyard. In 1985, a pair of rare locomotives from the 1850s were discovered by chance, 90 feet, 27 meters below the surface off the coast of Long Branch in New Jersey, thanks to a marine surveyor. It's been said that they're perfectly positioned next to each other, as if running on parallel tracks. No one actually knows what they're doing there, but experts have made an educated guess. Seems these trains might have fallen off a boat. Because the 222T locomotives, dubbed Planet Class, were made by the famous Stephenson Company from northeast England, and they were most likely being transported when disaster struck. Bad weather conditions might have forced the sailors to offload their precious cargo. Robert Stephenson and his team also brought the world the rocket, as in the train rather than the flying thing. The company was responsible for making the first mass-market locomotive engines. So these trains are prestigious indeed. It's just a shame they didn't get to be used. Sadly, records for the sunken trains aren't available. The model itself didn't last long in the busy and competitive world of the railways, making the find an unusual slice of industrial history. Bearing in mind they've been in the ocean for over a century, the planets are in pretty good condition. Instead of passengers, they have barnacles, but those could easily be scraped off. Not like they've paid their fare, right? 6. Apollo's engines. Jeff Bezos and his Amazon empire has long been associated with space exploration, as well as books and general consumer goods. With his eyes long focused on the stars, Bezos even went so far as to launch Captain Kirk himself, aka William Shatner, into space aboard his state-of-the-art craft. But did you know that Bezos is as interested in the history of space travel as he is with its future? Back in 2013, reports came in that his expedition to trace classic Saturn V NASA rocket engines used in iconic missions such as Apollo 11 had been successful. Where was he looking for these discarded first-stage engines that helped Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and many other illustrious names on their way? At the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, where they'd plummeted from a great height into the watery depths. Sinking approximately 14,000 feet, 4,270 meters down, there are apparently 5 of these engines up for grabs, and Bezos retrieved a couple. He has enough parts to reconstruct these engines. The originals aren't exactly going to stay in a neat little package after spending so long in salt water, so this is very much a case of using what you can after the remains are brought up piece by piece. Bezos employed ROVs to seek out the cosmic treasure. If anyone's going to be doing stuff like this, it's Bezos, right? When you've conquered pretty much the world with your businesses, it's time to focus on solving mysteries others don't have the time and, crucially, the resources to solve. What do you think is next for Jeff Bezos? Let us know in the comments below and hit the subscribe button while you're at it. 5. Mammoth Tusk. If you think cars and trains are weird things to be found by divers, then what about an Ice Age mammoth tusk from over 100,000 years ago? First spotted in 2019, it's something you might expect to find in the Arctic. However, this example was at the bottom of the sea in California. The tusk belonged to Mammuthus columbi, a Colombian mammoth, specifically the female of the species. Located 10,000 feet, 3,070 meters below the surface, the tusk measures 3 feet, 1 meter in length and is in excellent condition. It was well preserved owing to the cold temperature and high pressures of the deep sea. Retrieving the bony specimen wasn't easy. The first attempt didn't go well with a section breaking off. Still, it worked out okay in the end, because that fragment could then be studied and scientists could extract DNA. A later mission was undertaken to scoop up the whole tusk. ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles, proved crucial in accessing such an inhospitable environment. There could be thousands of discoveries like this waiting to be found by scientists on the deep ocean floor. But human activities like undersea oil drilling have the potential to destroy these ancient natural treasures. 4. Firebird. Imagine if you had your car stolen back in the late 1980s and you only just heard about its whereabouts today. Well, you might want to hold your breath. We mean literally hold your breath in the case of this classic 1983 Pontiac Firebird, because it was found underwater and wasn't exactly suitable for driving. The vehicle was only spotted due to its watery grave being routinely drained by authorities. Mirror Lake in Georgia revealed its car-shaped treasure to shocked locals and police. Reportedly, only the roof could be seen, but there was no doubt that it was a site that needed investigating. So it was rescued from the water, and there was good news and bad news. The bad news is that mud had pretty much flooded the Firebird and left it beyond repair. The good news is that it seems the tires were still surprisingly firm, which is rather incredible if you think about it. 3. Truck Ghost Fleet. Welcome to the beautiful Chuk Lagoon in the South Pacific. It wasn't always so beautiful, however. Back in the mid-1940s, it was the scene of carnage during the Second World War. The Allies unleashed hell on the Japanese Imperial Navy, who were establishing themselves at the lagoon on the Caroline Islands. Hundreds of aircraft and dozens of boats had amassed on the scene. On February 17, 1944, 4 light carriers and 5 fleet carriers, along with support ships and some 500 aircraft, descended on the islands in a sneak attack. Just a week before the assault, called Operation Hailstone, the Japanese military had moved additional ships to the area, and as a result, approximately 250 Japanese aircraft were destroyed and more than 50 ships sunk. An estimated 400 Japanese soldiers were killed, trapped in the cargo hold in one ship alone. Most of the fleet remains in exactly the same spot it was left. The site was largely forgotten by the world until the late 1960s. The Truck Ghost Fleet made headlines thanks to intrepid undersea explorer Jacques Cousteau. Younger viewers may know him best as the inspiration for that weird Bill Murray movie where he drove a submarine. He filmed a documentary titled Lagoon of Lost Ships that cast new light on this dramatic slice of wartime history. Major caution is advised to anyone swimming around in the area. We'd say it's much safer watching the footage and marveling at this mystery graveyard below the waves from the comfort of your home. 2. Abandoned Bugatti. Meet the Dama do Lago, or Lady of the Lake. Often, it's a mystery why a beautiful classic car winds up disintegrating at the bottom of a lake. However, in the case of this Type 22 Bugatti Brescia, we know exactly how it ended up there. The rare Bugatti Roadster 1925 was pushed into the waters of Lake Maggiore between Switzerland and Italy by customs inspectors in 1936. This occurred after the owner abandoned the vehicle without paying the import tax due. At the time, the value of the car was lower than the debt, and the customs agents were forced to destroy it. It sank to a depth of around 164 feet, 50 meters, and may well have been lost to the fishes and crabs if it wasn't for the one crucial factor, the mud. The car is far from perfect condition, nor is it likely to be. After all, it spent a reported 72 years in Lake Maggiore. Yet parts of it survived much better than others, due to the fact the Bugatti went on its side, and that side was protected by the mud. The car lay underwater for several decades before being seen again by a diver in the late 1960s. It wasn't until 2009 that arrangements were made to crane the Bugatti out and back on dry land. The reason is a tragic but worthy one. A charity raising money around the issue of youth violence decided it would be a great idea to rescue the vintage vehicle and auction it off. This seemingly complex operation took no less than 9 months to plan and execute. From there, the Bugatti went to the Mullen Automotive Museum in California. Another exotic location for this classic roadster to be seen in. 1. Heracleon. We're lucky to have found the ancient port city of Heracleon at all. Why? Because it sank in an area off the Alexandria coast in Egypt, following what appears to have been a devastating earthquake in the 8th century AD. For a long time, it wasn't clear at all whether this place even existed. The Greek historian and chronicler Herodotus wrote about Heracleon, and it was certainly important to both ancient Egyptian and Greek cultures who had different names for it. It was thought to be 2 separate places until the truth was revealed. We can see why things got confused. This was the biggest port city in ancient Egypt, full of activity and culture. By the late 1990s, an archaeologist named Frank Goddio from France was in the land of the pharaohs on a separate mission when he stumbled on what remained of Heracleon. Originally, he was on the lookout for remnants of the Battle of the Nile, fought by Napoleon, which took place between the British Empire and the French Republic in late 1798. Instead, Goddio found a treasure trove, which included statues and figures of important names, from deities to royalty. There were also sarcophagi and pillars bearing inscriptions, helping to further fill in the background of this epic community, believed to stretch back to the 7th century BC. The discovery is only a piece of a much larger puzzle. It's amazing how such an ancient place can survive so long underwater, ready for 21st century divers to explore. Thanks for watching. Which one of these amazing underwater discoveries fascinated you the most? 10. Drug-filled sharks. The Sinaloa cartel trafficked cocaine for several years, at least since 2009, in frozen sharks that were filled with the drug. The route they followed went from Costa Rica to Puerto de Progreso, Yucatan, Mexico. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman became infamous for his involvement in Mexico's Sinaloa cartel, an international crime syndicate that rose to power in the 1980s. As one of the most powerful drug trafficking operations in the world, they took a lot of chances and had to come up with inventive ways to get their drugs out to the masses. One of the most creative ways was by using frozen sharks to smuggle their goods. After receiving a tip on a shipment of illicit cargo from the Mexican Navy, the Center for Maritime and Port Incidents and Customs Agents seized multiple shipments at the Yucatan Container Terminal. There, they found 2 suspicious containers, and using X-ray equipment, they then inspected the contents. Inside, they discovered something wasn't quite right, and after deploying a team of drug-sniffing dogs, the team found what was hidden inside. At first glance, the load of frozen sharks looked just like another shipment making its way from Mexico to Texas. But after authorities looked closer, they realized there were packages of white powder hidden inside the frozen sharks that later proved to be cocaine. The Sinaloa cartel had been transporting their drugs this way for a long time, so the seizure was an important one to sideline these illegal activities. But the operation was also a costly one for sharks. The Velazquez Fishing Corporation, a group that worked for the cartel since 2007, killed thousands of sharks each year to keep the charade going. As law enforcement agencies try to crack down on these illegal activities, it inspires traffickers to come up with clever ways to transport illegal goods. Using boats, planes, and even submarines is common, so when this massive haul of frozen drug-filled sharks was discovered, it was an eye-opener for law officials. Drug enforcement agents realized they needed to think outside the box to stop these illegal substances from making their way to the streets. 9. Chinese gun parts. Drugs and illegal animal products aren't the only things criminals try to smuggle, but they usually try to hide their shady activities. When US Customs and Border Protection officers intercepted 3 shipments of gun parts in 2019, they were stunned and confused at the number of weapons. What stunned them was that those criminals didn't even try to hide their shipment. 3 shipments of nearly 53,000 gun sights, stocks, and other parts arrived in Long Beach, California, all labeled correctly and with their original trademarks. So why were they seized? There was an arms embargo with China, which meant that exports, imports, and sales of firearms from China were prohibited. The ban was put into place as sales of gun parts soared in the US, with munitions and other items up 18% over 2018. Because the items weren't hidden, it led custom agents to believe that whoever sent them might have been testing the US government to see how closely they were watching incoming shipments. The authorities were keeping a close eye on the ports, preventing almost $400,000 of gun parts from making it to the streets. 8. Cocaine-filled baked goods. Police on the small Colombian island of San Andres noticed a recent spike in strange methods of transporting drugs. 2 men were passing through the local airport carrying a red box filled with donuts, and agents wanted to get a closer look. Thanks to their suspicions, authorities ended up finding that the 12 donuts were filled with just over 2 pounds, 1,000 grams of cocaine. That's about how much a liter of water weighs. But that's not the first time baked goods have been used to smuggle illegal substances. In 2018, Mexican authorities located around 4 pounds, 1.8 kilograms of cocaine. That's about as heavy as 7 cans of soup, worth almost $270,000 inside bread rolls destined for the United States. With the help of sniffer dogs, the 15 bread rolls were discovered. Another haul destined for New York was found when customers nabbed a Guyanese taxi driver who was found carrying 16 pounds, 7 kilograms of cocaine. That's more than the weight of 2 bowling balls. While scanning the man's luggage, officers became suspicious and pulled the man aside to question him. During the interrogation, they located drugs inside various pastries. It prompted them to conduct an even more thorough search, where officers found more drugs hidden in the man's shoes, which earned him a set of trafficking charges and a trip to prison to await trial. Even though criminals seem to get crafty with how they're hiding their illegal activities, law enforcement seems to catch on and find ways to stop these traffickers. 7. Smuggled Turtle. Customs agents have seen it all, which means smugglers have tried to get creative when trying to sneak something across international borders. When a man boarded a flight on China Southern Airlines to Beijing, he went through the usual checkpoints. But when he passed through the X-ray screening machines, airport security noticed a few odd protrusions coming out of something inside his bag. The passenger, only known as Mr. Lee, insisted there was nothing strange inside his bag. But agents persisted, and when they took a closer look, they found a Kentucky Fried Chicken wrapper. There was no sandwich inside the wrapper. Instead, the man's pet turtle was disguised as the mystery burger. Airport staff were understandably stunned and pulled the passenger aside to question him about the odd discovery. Mr. Lee explained that he simply wanted to travel with his beloved pet. No one knows why the passenger thought disguising his pet as a hamburger was a good idea. Maybe if it passed the turtle off as a service animal, he would have had more luck. Instead, his idea of a crafty disguise only ended up alerting the agents to his secret. Mr. Lee didn't get in any trouble, but he did have to abandon his pet. 6. A ton of coke. Authorities at the Port of New York and New Jersey recently seized about 3,200 pounds, 1,451 kilograms of cocaine from a shipping container. That's about 3 times as heavy as a grand piano. DEA Special Agent in Charge Ray Donovan told NPR agents carried out an inspection of the shipment after they noticed several containers on a large vessel traveling from Buenaventura, Colombia had been tampered with. That is when agents discovered the near ton and a half of cocaine, with a projected street value of $77 million. The bust was part of a joint operation involving the DEA, Customs and Border Patrol, Coast Guard, Homeland Security, New York Police Department, and New York State Police. The shipment was seized when the boat stopped over in New York on its way to Antwerp, Belgium. It contained an authentic shipment of dried fruit, but officials didn't know whether the drugs were intended for the US or meant to carry on to Europe. The cocaine was loaded on the back of the shipment, which told authorities it was the last thing put into the container. This means it will be the first thing taken off, suggesting a very sophisticated group that's been involved in trafficking for quite some time was responsible. Officials said the shipment is part of a greater development in higher cocaine usage in recent years. Experts say the cocaine market is coming back. Authorities seized about 26,500 pounds, 12,020 kilograms of cocaine in 2018. That's about the weight of 2 elephants. Agents are especially concerned with the growing trend of cocaine laced with fentanyl, a powerful opiate often used as a cheap, more potent alternative to heroin. What do you think is the best way to win the war on drugs in the US? Share your thoughts in the comments, and remember to hit the subscribe button for more videos like this. 5. Illegal ivory. Hong Kong custom officials were stunned when they came across a massive shipment of illegal animal products. Authorities at Hong Kong's port were fed a tip from customs officials that the suspicious cargo was heading their way. Following the information, officials located 21 crates and containers with a wood shipment that had traveled through Shanghai from Nigeria. Hidden within the wood, almost 1,200 ivory tusks were found, along with 13 rhino horns and nearly 5,000 pounds, 2,266 kilograms of leopard skins. That's as heavy as an SUV. The shipment ended up being one of the largest busts of endangered species products. Activists were just as alarmed as the customs officials. They say that as China's presence grows in Africa, elephants are being hunted and their tusks poached before being smuggled into Thailand to make ivory ornaments. Since 2007, the illegal trade in ivory has more than doubled. a devastating number that puts many animals at risk. With ivory going for up to $1,000 a pound, 0.45 kilograms on the black market, poachers are making a massive payday on exotic animal parts. To give you an idea of how much the black market pays, one elephant tusk can earn poachers up to $50,000. At one time, over 2 tons, about the same amount as a rhinoceros, of elephant tusks were reportedly found in a container coming from the Congo on its way to Hong Kong. Not all poachers are selling animal parts for decoration. In Asia, some believe that grinding up rhino horns and consuming them can help cure diseases. Even though under Hong Kong law, those found guilty of illegal trading can face time in prison and hefty fines, it still isn't enough to protect these animals from being hunted for their parts. 4. JP Morgan cocaine ship. When reports surfaced of a massive cocaine bust at Philadelphia port, no one expected banking giant JP Morgan Chase to be the culprit behind the discovery of 20 tons of cocaine. That's about 11 times as heavy as a car. With a street value of about $1.3 billion, the illegal drugs were found on board the MSC Guyane, a cargo ship. US Customs and Border Protection seized the drugs, but after news broke, the US Attorney's Office issued a warrant that gave them the power to seize the ship, which was on its way to Northern Europe. Ships like this aren't usually confiscated, but given the size of the haul and the street value of the drugs, law enforcement made the right move. Even though the ship was owned by the bank, it flew under the Liberian flag, which meant it wasn't operated by the bank. It was up to agents to look into how the ship was connected to the banking giant, as they tried to figure out who among the crew was involved in the illegal operation. As prosecutors worked the case, they found out that one of the crew members who'd first started working on the ship 11 years earlier had set his sights on becoming the second in command behind the captain of the ship. Motivated by greed, Bosko Markovic and 3 other men boarded the ship in Montenegro, and along with 4 other crew members, used secret communications to plan their operation. They worked under the cover of night on speedboats, loading duffel bags of cocaine onto the ship, hiding the drugs in containers where they hoped they wouldn't be found. Luckily, because of an anonymous tip, the cocaine was seized and all the conspirators were convicted and sentenced for their part in the crime. Who do you think tipped off the authorities? 3. Pangolins. The pangolin is an unusual and rare animal. There are 8 different species of the mammal, each one covered entirely in scales and known to curl into a ball to protect themselves from predators. In 2014, a shipping container was seized in Hong Kong with a record 8 tons of scales found inside. That's about 4 times as heavy as a giraffe. It's no wonder why this member of the anteater family is an endangered species. These animals are one of the most trafficked mammals in Asia. In 2016, the World Wildlife Foundation passed a special law to help protect these animals and reduce the number of businesses that seek illegal wildlife products. Sadly, hunters continue poaching the animals for their meat, considered a delicacy in China. They also seek them out for their scales, made from the same material as human fingernails and hair. Even though that might not make the animal's scales seem that special, they are used in traditional folk remedies to cure various illnesses. These beliefs are putting the pangolin at risk, with about 100,000 snatched every year. Between 2011 and 2013, about 230,000 were killed. Not even international laws protecting the animals can stop poachers from targeting them. They aren't vicious creatures, only living off the ants, termites, and larvae they scavenge. So it's hard to tell exactly when the pangolin became such a sought-after animal. As illegal international trading of pangolins and their parts continues to rise, these quiet creatures will remain at risk. 2. Drug-filled statue. The next time you pick up a keepsake from one of your trips abroad, you might want to look inside first. What looked like an innocent snail statue coming from the Sinaloa state of Mexico ended up with a surprise inside for eagle-eyed US customs agents in Cincinnati. The figurine was labeled as Mexican stonecrafts, but because many of the illegal drugs available in the USA come through Mexico, agents took a closer look. Using X-ray machines, they detected anomalies inside the figure, which prompted them to drill some holes in the bottom, exposing white crystalline powder inside. Tests confirmed that the substance was methamphetamine, with the total haul coming in at just over 50 pounds, 23 kilograms of the drug. That's the same weight as a bag of cement mix. Not only is it a lethal trade, with drugs being produced by some of the most dangerous cartels, but narcotics produced in Mexico are often more potent and purer, leading to more deaths. As more drug seizures are made, traffickers are trying to come up with inventive ways to get their goods into the US, prompting customs agents to scrutinize incoming packages and goods even more closely. The discovery of the snail statue and its unique concealment method is a reminder that agents need to stay sharp if they want to restrict the availability of these dangerous drugs. 1. Canadian opium seizure. When a couple of shipping containers looked a little suspicious to Canada Border Services agents, they decided to investigate, and it's a good thing they did. They ended up discovering 84 packages of opium in containers that had arrived at their border from the United Arab Emirates. But that was just the beginning. Almost 2 months later, officers at the same facility found another shipping container from the UAE with 75 pounds, 31 kilograms of opium. That's about how much your dryer weighs. Combined with the previous seizure, agents had found almost 11 pounds, 96 kilograms of the drugs, which are processed into highly addictive heroin and other opioids. That's about how much a gallon of paint weighs. Wondering how custom agents knew which containers to search? The National Targeting Center monitors goods coming into Canada, flagging anything they think might pose a threat to the safety and security of the country. After tracking the containers, the NTC felt they might contain something risky, so they informed the Canada Border Services Agency about the shipment. Luckily, customs agents examined the containers and located the drugs before they could slip silently into Canada. And with over 2,600 pounds, 1,200 kilograms, as heavy as 3 horses of opium seized in 2021 alone, it seems they have their work cut out for them. Thanks for watching. Which one of these things seized from customs officers did you find the craziest? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like these. See you next time, bye!